This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com. Virginia hospitals and health systems provide jobs. They support our economy and promote public health. Local hospitals are always open to help people with unexpected health needs. Having a stable healthcare network is vital. Virginia hospitals are our lifeline.
It's amazing what my students with special needs can accomplish. Their pride is priceless. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a welcome back to Secretary of Transportation Aubrey Lane. Really appreciate your coming back on. Perfect timing, as we were just talking about everything that's happening in your 7 agencies with over 10,000 employees, and the budget moving up close now to $6 billion. And why don't you start with letting our viewers know about where you just were earlier this morning, and tell our viewers we're talking on a Monday morning, and they'll be seeing the show the end of the week. But very exciting.
No, it is, and you're right. A lot of good things going on in transportation. Thanks, David, for having me here again.
Yes.
But this morning, I was at an event at the Port of Virginia down in Hampton Roads. The first post-Panamax ship that came through the Wad-Panama Canal, berthed actually in Virginia at the Port of Virginia last evening. But we had an event today, recognized that, the MOL Benefactor. Over a 10,000 TEU or container ship, which is about twice the size of others, and they're going to be bigger than that.
That's huge, yeah.
But it was the first one, so we had an event down there celebrating the arrival of those vessels, which is going to be really important as we're making investments in the Port of Virginia. You know, the General Assembly and the Governor this year approved $350 million to expand the Norfolk International Terminals. That's where this vessel was at. So we've got a great opportunity. This is just an example of what that opportunity is with these large ships. So we got to be prepared for it. So we were down celebrating that today.
And as you were saying, that was a big enough event that the Panamanian ambassador was there.
Yes,
Yeah.
Ambassador Gonzalez Revilla was there coming up. This was, when it went through the canal, the largest amount of fare going through. I think it was like $380,000. It's since been eclipsed by other ships coming through. Right. But he was excited what it means for the people of Panama, but also you know, we're excited about what it means for the Port of Virginia.
In all of your agencies, you cover transportation, whether it's sea in the port, whether it's air, rail, roads. I mean, it is comprehensive.
It is. In fact, you say air, it's also outer space.
Yes,
we have a spaceport here.
Right.
But of course, the rail, Department of Rail and Public Transit, so all the trains that go through the Commonwealth, and of course all the roads, and Motor Dealer Vehicle Board and DMV, which we had some exciting things this year about electronic voter registration. Going on this week, the governor announced. So yes, quite a comprehensive set of agencies, but I'm blessed with a good team. Got some really good people working there.
You mentioned DMV, and go back and say a bit more about that, because that's quite innovative for the Commonwealth of Virginia to be able to do that registration in those sites.
It is. In fact, the DMV is actually becoming the face of Virginia, because remember a few years ago, Vital Records, you could go there and get your birth certificates, and now your marriage licenses and health records, working with the Department of Health. And now voter registration, making it easier for people to get registered to vote and establish citizenry, where they're to vote and everything. So it is a big deal, and I think it's just the innovation that continues to go on at the DMV, and Rick Holcomb and his team are doing a great job over there.
I was talking with a friend just a couple of weeks ago before this announcement, and he'd moved from one location in Richmond to another, and it's changing his voter precinct. And so as he gets his driver's license, new address, he gets the voter registration part done at the same site.
He get it all updated right then and there, so you don't have to worry about going somewhere else to get your voting established. So it really is, and I point out again that with the innovation, the technology that's going through, really do appreciate the collaboration we have with other agencies at DMV to bring these services to the citizens of the Commonwealth.
You know, I've heard discussion in previous administrations as well as this one about getting out of the silos and being able to work together. And the news release on this I saw where the director of a Department of Elections was involved. I mean, so it's really trying to merge.
That's right. Governor McAuliffe has been very, very adamant about making sure we're collaborating around not only with our interagencies, which I put a big effort on, the rail, working with the highways and all that, but also among the various agencies throughout his entire cabinet. So we do work closely with, in that particular case, Secretary Rodriguez, but also Secretary of Health, Bill Hazel, Secretary Haymore, who's now at Commerce, but before worked with him, and former Secretary Maurice Jones. But yes, quite a bit, because particularly I view the Secretary of Transportation as enabling others, particularly the other commercial things in the Commonwealth. The governor always talking about new Virginia economy. If we don't have goods and services moving, freight moving, that's underpins everything. So we really do take seriously, our charge to make sure we're moving motorists and freight and commerce across the Commonwealth.
Just this past week, the most recent big news that hit the front page of the newspapers around the Commonwealth was something about Fast Lane grant.
That's right. Fast Lane was the new highway authorization bill that the federal authorities passed. And a big component of that was a competitive grant. It was $800 million across the country, an innovative and multimodal competitive grant. And we entered that, the Commonwealth of Virginia did, in the 95 quarter. That included vehicular traffic, hot lanes. It included expansion of our rail provided in that particular area. Also freight benefits, transit benefits, park and rides. It was really a multimodal grant, and the governor announced this week that we were the largest grant recipient in the country, $165 million from the federal authorities, which they basically looked at our application as being not only intermodal or multimodal, but it included state financing, our private parties, CSX Railroad, Transurban, extending the hot lane, CSX on the tracks, and state funding. So it's a great example of how all three of those types of monies can be blended together. A lot of people talk about public-private partnerships. They're very important in Virginia. But one type of funding is not a substitute for another. It's an addition to, and this is what we believe this grant shows, that we're really being good stewards for the Commonwealth of Virginia by combining these various modes. But really was an exciting time. Governor McAuliffe had a chance to get out several times this past week and announce that. And I also want to thank the legislators that were involved that really supported our grant. And as I said, very pleased with the top grant in the country.
And some of the reports that I was reading in the newspapers, you talking about legislators, Speaker Howell was just thrilled about this being in the Fredericksburg area, about what it would do to that part of the Commonwealth, particularly going on up north from there.
It is. If you look, and that's what our grant pointed out, the 95 quarter from Richmond to the Washington, D.C. is the most congested quarter when you combine the transit, the vehicular traffic, the freight, the passenger rail that goes through there, the most congested quarter in the Southeast. That includes Miami, that includes the Atlanta region. And so while it is great, Speaker Howell was a big supporter, while it was great that it does help that area, it helps the entire state of Virginia. People don't realize that every train, we were talking earlier about going out to Southwest Virginia, it comes through that corridor. Right. We don't realize the freight movements that go through there to the Port of Virginia. certainly if you're traveling in what they call the Golden Crescent down from Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, Richmond, down to Hampton Roads, if you've been in a vehicle, getting that moving faster is very important, not only for commerce, but to the tourism that goes through there. So the Hot Lanes expansion through there, so very excited, and I think I've gotten good comments from all over the Commonwealth, people understanding, yes, it impacts that immediate area, but it helps all our citizens across the state.
At your last Commonwealth Transportation Board, as you were working out the 5-year plan and all, and some of that money allocated for this purpose, that was before you knew you got this grant.
That's right, and that's the key, Dave.
Yeah.
We knew that certain things we would probably go forward with without the grant.
Right.
For instance, we knew in the Fredericksburg area, if you've come down the Hot Lanes and they end there around Gainesville, it's a backup. So we were going to go ahead and expand that a couple miles to alleviate that congestion. But now it'll go 10 miles. It'll go all the way down through Fredericksburg, tying to the new Rappahannock bridges. So yes, we had anticipated doing some of those projects. It's approved from the Transportation Board meeting. But now with this grant, as I've always said, the sum of that project, the whole of that project, is much greater than the individual parts if you took them apart. And so that's what the key was, and I think our federal partners realize that, and we're very excited. You know, a big component of this is 60 miles of railroad track that CSX is going to be dedicating to the Commonwealth of Virginia, south of Petersburg, that now makes it, as we get the monies, higher speed rail through the entire Commonwealth. First time they have come to the table, and we're really appreciative of their efforts working with us on that. Transurban, our partner on the express lanes that will be now on 395 and on the Fredericksburg southern end. So it was a team effort that came together, and again, we're very appreciative of Secretary Fox and our federal partners who allocated that money to us.
So the high-speed rail is not just a dream, it's in the plans, it's going to happen at some point.
That's right, and it'll be higher speed in Virginia because true high speed would be needed for electrified tracks, and that's pretty much the Northeast. But speeds up to 110 miles an hour below Petersburg, 79 to 90 miles an hour north of Richmond going up. But the key will be it'll be reliable. And now that will be a dedicated track. We now can go all the way through the Commonwealth of Virginia, having that higher speed go through our entire Commonwealth. But no, it's no longer a pipe dream. It's no longer something talked about. It's something that's actually going to happen.
All right. Here in the greater Richmond area, folks talk about Staples Mill and then Main Street. And
that's right.
And then in recent months, someone was even tossing out the idea about the boulevard and having a station there. I guess there's some of those things probably still to be worked on out.
Oh, yes, a lot of that. We're working through what the environmental process, the phase 2, the tier 2 process. And here in a few months, there'll be a recommendation made about where those stations should be. You mentioned the Richmond area. There's been a lot of rhetoric and a lot of news coverage, not only here in Richmond, but up in the Hanover and Ashland County, Ashland up in that area. The way the process works is we will make a recommendation, but it's really the FRA that will make the final decision. But it's all going to be based on how people use it, what the cost would be, the cost benefit. You mentioned here in Richmond, all those destinations in Main Street or the Boulevard or Staples Mill all have good attributes, all have different servicing. And so we'll try to look at and make the best recommendation. But as you know, in transportation, people are pretty opinionated. And so we're getting a lot of opinions of where that station should go. But that's good because the type of public input, what I've told our people is let's make sure we hear them. They may not agree, but at least we'll say we've listened and we said, here's why we made this decision. So I think it's very important and glad to hear from the citizens as we make these decisions.
You know, a key thing that you said that might be worth even emphasizing a bit, if I heard you correctly, you make the recommendations from your agencies, but the decision is made
by the Federal Rail Association or Authority. In this particular case, because as you know, railroads are federal. There are statutes that govern those, the movement of goods and services on those railroads. So now don't get me wrong, they'll listen to what we have to say, but at the end of the day, it will be their decision.
Yes. Well, now, What about high-speed rail? There's a discussion about it in the eastern part of the
That's
state.
exactly right. In fact, once we finish here,
higher speed.
the higher speed rail, that's
Right.
right, the Hampton Roads area, we'll begin that process. And there's 2 points to be made there. Number one, we need to figure out where we're going to connect here in Richmond or Petersburg,
Right,
so we
right.
know where to connect coming out of Hampton Roads. But also, all these decisions are demand driven. And I tell people, if you really want to get the federal authorities' attention, that's have conventional rail drive demand on that, because that will help them make the decision to put the investment of the resources into higher speed rail. You know, also down in Hampton Roads, we've got a big vote coming up on light rail, which is sort of the last mile component, but it all ties together. I'm hopeful that there'll be a positive outcome on light rail, extending it from Norfolk to Virginia Beach, because I think that also sends a signal that the residents of Hampton Roads are serious about rail, and that will help with getting higher speed or other rail coming there. And I know, you know, people say they're not connected, but they are, particularly in how they're funded and how the federal authorities view them, which has got to be a big part of our funding sources as we move forward. But certainly Hampton Roads is key into connecting that major population area to not only our capital, but other parts of the state.
Folks that travel up in the Northern Virginia area or in other states know about the subways or the metro systems.
Yes.
How does that compare with light rail? Help our viewers who maybe not
Yes.
know about what's light rail. It's not the high speed.
That's right. Light rail tends to be in lesser dense areas. It is the precursor to getting to metro or what they call heavier rail that then connects into longer distance rail like
Right.
the Virginia Railway Express or other things. But they are alike in that where you see those stations, there is significant development comes about.
yes.
If you were to fly a helicopter, which I have, over Northern Virginia, you can point to wherever those railway metro stations are. And I think that's key. Everybody says, well, you know, light rail or passenger rail is all about just moving people. It's part of that. It's also about economic development and getting people to invest in areas, because if you think about this, that track is stationary. Well, some people say, well, that's a negative because I can't go where I go. No, that attracts long-term investment because people say there's going to be a committed connectivity between those two areas. So light rail is important, connecting us into heavier rail like Metro, and then of course the long distance rail, VRE, and then of course even Amtrak as we go not only just within our state, but outside our borders.
You mentioned in passing the western part of the state just a few minutes ago,
Yep.
and I know the folks in Roanoke are very excited that where they've been running buses over to Lynchburg, that soon Roanoke and then soon beyond that. So that area, even with less population, is really getting some attention.
We started the train to Lynchburg, and we had,
Yes.
as you mentioned, the bus bridge to Roanoke. That has been an extremely successful line.
Yeah.
We're going to add additional service to Lynchburg, but also going to Roanoke. I was meeting with the people in Bristol out that way. They look forward to having the extension coming out to the Bristol area, which I think will be a natural progression. But again, it's the incremental approach. The reason it's going to go to Roanoke, that bus bridge was very, very successful, and they saw the need and they went there. So I tell the people that's the way. Use what you have, get it over capacity, and that will attract the investment necessary to continue the extension.
Bedford has made the news some too,
have.
between wanting to have a station there. Is that something still being wrestled with?
It is, and I met with the individuals in Bedford. In fact, the governor had a Cabin on the Road event, and that was one of the events I did. They're doing the right thing, advocating for a station in Bedford, but it really comes down to where the other stations will be located, how they'll be used, what's the right distance between the two. We talked about Ashland. Staples Mill is only 16 miles away. If it ended up being in Richmond, then maybe Ashland isn't designated as a station. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but that's what we're going through now. The people are doing the right things, whether it's in Ashland, whether it's in Bedford, advocating for it, talking about what's good and bad for their location so that an informed decision can be made.
Excellent. Let's go back to air. In fact,
Yes.
you said space flight.
Yes, sir.
And that's has been in the news and very positive. There's some challenges that had to be overcome, but it's coming back.
Coming back, yes. We had a successful what's called hot fire where they tested the new
Excellent.
engines. The pad's been rebuilt
Excellent.
at Wallops. And sometime, they haven't set the exact date, but sometime in this summer, we're thinking it's going to be middle to August to early September. We'll be returning with our partners Orbital. We'll be going back to the space station where we supply those goods and services for the astronauts based on the space station. So very exciting, looking forward to that happening again. You're right, we had a mishap over there about a year and a half ago. That's all been not only been remedied as far as the physical structure, but with new agreements, and so very exciting things happening in space. Also at Wallops, the drone, we've got the new airfield being built that will help us to attract unmanned vehicles. We talk about them a lot on the roads, but certainly in the air, and so drone activity. So we're really seeing some good things happening at our space facility. Virginia Space is becoming well known.
So on the drones, you said be able to track them?
Actually, it's going to be about a 3.5 miles worth of landing area where we're a test area looking at drone activity, not only in the Commonwealth, but up on the East Coast. So having that people to use our runway to test the different types of drones and stuff.
I know that drones made the news, particularly in the western part of the state, and Secretary Hazel's secretariat.
Dropping the medications over to
the Wise.
And Wise, yes. Yeah. Well, it's coming. You know, the federal authorities just released, and we had Randy Burnett our director of aviation, sat on the panel. Just released for the small drones, the guidelines. But there's a lot of applications, not only delivering goods, but inspections of our bridges, all that. So we've got a whole lot of things ahead of us, some exciting things that technologies allow us to do.
You know, one thing that we haven't mentioned, and I don't know how you could estimate this exactly, but if you can, I know you will. All of this transportation initiatives really is creating lots of jobs in the Commonwealth.
It is. I'm glad you picked that up. In fact, it means a great deal many jobs. I was just meeting with Jeff Southard at the Virginia Contractors Association, Transportation Contractors Association. In fact, I'm down there this week. And that's right. All these, right now, the state of Virginia will have over, once with this new Gateway grant and these 66 projects and what's going on in Hampton Roads, other parts, over $5 billion of projects under construction. That is significant to not only to VDOT, but also the small businesses and large businesses that support. And with our Smart Scale, formerly House Bill 2, they know all those projects are going to happen because they're fully constrained. You mentioned our 6-year plan. So they can plan their businesses. So last I looked, there was over 60,000 people employed in the Commonwealth directly with building our roads. That's going to go up significantly. That's not the indirect, but just the direct people out there building them. You throw that in with the additional maintenance that's going on around the Commonwealth, certainly part of Virginia's, what Governor McCullough calls the new economy. Transportation plays a big part in that, not just in providing, as we talk about enabling the flow of goods and services, but actually building them and producing those jobs.
You know, there's lots of discussion, particularly as one gets close to the federal elections, about the need for infrastructure money from Washington to go to the 50 states. And we can hope that however the elections turn out, there'll be money that Congress and the new administration will be allocating that will help in bridges that need attention and other initiatives.
Well, you hit on a great point. Our infrastructure has not been kept up the way it should be in this country, and I'm particularly concerned about the highways and bridges, but it's other plants too, other things. And so Governor McCullough has been clear. He sees that as a core function of government. So thank the legislature for working with us and addressing this needs. But you're right, it's not going to be done without additional federal help. That's why we were so glad to get the Fast Lane grant that we did. And of course, we now have to spend those monies wisely, but certainly would advocate for more monies, both from federal and anywhere we can get it.
Yes. Secretary Lane, thank you so much for being on This Week in Richmond. And I tell you, you give a new interpretation to a CPA with all of your excitement and your energy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having here. Look forward to coming back again.
Thank you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community. For jobs, the economy, and public health, Virginia Hospitals, our lifeline.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.